Morning, morning, morning. Good morning. Good morning to you.
At 18 and a half minutes now after 7 o'clock, we're talking HR with HRMAB. You know, it's one of my favorite segments of the week. Joining us as we look at this whole subject of going beyond lip service, looking at diversity and inclusivity in the workplace is Nicholas Roberts, who is the Vice President of HRMAB, and with him is Sonia Layne-Gartside, a global consultant. To both of you, I say good morning.
Morning, person.
Good morning.
Morning, Barbados.
Good to see both of you yet again, indeed. And so I want to start with definitions. We need to understand what it is so that we can begin to break it down and see how we can apply it. What's the difference between diversity and inclusivity, and what is diversity and inclusivity in the workplace? Nicholas, we'll start with you.
Sure. So morning again, Pearson. So diversity speaks to your organization should look like the country or the society it operates within. So in terms of having a wide array of people when it comes to race, class, sexuality, social backgrounds, those type of things, that speaks to diversity. The inclusivity portion of it speaks to those people having a voice or having a seat at the table when it comes to feeling a part of the organization and a part of being their opinions being valued.
You know, Sonia, when one thinks about it, we can look around our office space and say, but we already have that. And who discusses that anyway? One's sexuality, one's this, one's whatever. You know, you just have people in the workplace who are somewhat different and they coexist and they get along. But why is it important for us, though, to really pay attention to how we do, if we're going to embrace the whole concept of diversity and inclusivity, to pay attention to get the mix right?
So it's very important.
It's important.
Sonia.
Yeah, go ahead, Sonia.
It's very important because depending on your social identity, how you see yourself, you bring a different lens to how you interact with people. And so your ideas, your opinions, your background, your personality creates a uniqueness. And when people are different, and if they're not given a way to navigate their differences, they can descend into conflict. So rather than come together and align to accomplish organizational goals, if you don't make a focus on it, how to train and teach people how to be inclusive, how to manage differences, then you can just be having an organization that you seem to get along, but really and truly you're just pulling against each other and not moving or rowing in the same direction.
How important is that a discussion at this time? Because, you know, there are people who say, but I employ you, I gave you a uniform, so you must look like each other. I give you set tasks, so you must be doing the same thing. I have no room for diversity because this is our measure of output. So how important is that in a today's environment with that kind of mindset that I just described?
Very important, because inclusion is about, can I come bring my full self to work and feel like I'm accepted and embraced, and I don't have to assimilate beyond what is reasonable, right? So when I walk into the organization, I will assimilate because you'll give me a uniform. There'll be certain cultural norms that we carry on, but does it ask me to leave a significant part of myself outside? And what we know from research, what we know from leadership development and organizational success is that doesn't work. You have to have an organization that enables people to bring their full selves, feel accepted, so that they can create and be innovative and work in a way that is very engaging and that does well for the organization.
That's very engaging and does well for the organization, but it can also be very disruptive when they bring their own selves. And so there has to be, to my mind, Nicholas, some kind of system put in place where you do take some measure of control of how far one goes in all of this. So talk to me, Nicholas, about how does, you know, inculcating this into any organization, how important is that to its success?
So it's very successful. So Sonia had mentioned in terms of the research when it comes to leadership development and diversity and inclusion. When people feel as if they are included within an organization, as if they belong, they're varying perspectives and backgrounds, it creates an enriched environment. Unfortunately, if it is that you don't have an environment diverse, that is not inclusive, then you have people who may be moving towards the same direction, but there be something called groupthink. So people are so accustomed to thinking one way or having the same perspective or the same of doing things, but it's not bringing an enriched environment within the organization. At the end of the day, it only works against the benefit of the organization and it being a successful and a thriving organization.
In other words, if I'm not happy being myself, then the likelihood is I'm not going to be the happiest outputter of service and products. Okay, fair enough. I get you. So, Sonia, you know, when we hear this whole thing about inclusivity and diversity, we think that's for North America, those more, you know, very vastly diverse societies, and little Barbados, where everybody looks almost like each other and everybody seems to behave in a particular way. How important is it for Barbados, and how can we get it done? What can we do to ensure that we do create and go beyond the lip service of, yeah, we're inclusive, yes, we're diverse, to get it done so that we achieve those goals?
It's extremely important for Barbados. We are facing so much challenges that are huge. And the beauty of diversity and inclusion is it brings everybody to the table. And as Nicholas referred to, it gets rid of that group think, and it frees up and allows the unique capabilities of people, their ideas, their creativity, their innovation to come to the table. And that doesn't happen organically, correct? Right? You have to train people on how do we ensure that when we come together and we unite like a choir and not be out of tune and singing different, you know, one person is singing soca, one person is singing opera. So one of the first things that we do here, and I work with organizations to do, is that you have a strategy. You have to come together and develop a strategy. So you can't be strategic planning without D&I. If you're strategic planning without D&I, you're developing a nice little plan that will not be implemented, right? Because you are not focusing on how do I ensure that I am maximizing and utilizing these differences, that people don't feel like they can't be themselves. Because when you feel you can't be yourself, you spend more time masking and trying to fit in than working. Right? And so you want to release people from that so they can bring every ounce of their energy, every ounce of their ideas, their creativity, the intellect to figure out how do we implement given these huge challenges. And so that starts, I always say it starts with having a leader that understands that this is their primary task, you know, to develop a good strategy, and to also ensure that within that strategy is how do we ensure that we get D&I involved in order to execute on our strategic plan.
Nicholas, how do we measure it? How do we ensure that day in, day out, that it is something that everyone holds and is accountable for?
So I think you measure it by the values of your organization. So as Sonia had mentioned, in terms of you having an HR strategy or HR plan, I think we've been discussing it throughout the various sessions with HRMAB and throughout the last 2 weeks. Your HR strategy and your HR plan guides the organization. And as would have mentioned continuously, it should feed into your organizational plan. With that being said, you should have metrics in place. So for instance, I know you spoke about North America. Sometimes they have something called a diversity hire, whereas they have a quota in terms of you have to have X amount of women sitting at the within the C-suite. You have to have X amount of people of color within your organization. I don't think we've necessarily gotten to that level as yet within Barbados, but that is how you measure it. Having measurable outputs in terms of saying, well, you need to have X people. But I think taking it a bit further, when you culture of the organization and when you develop the type of organization that you want through DNA, you say to yourself, come as you are and we will accept you. As you mentioned, yes, within the confines of the culture of the organization and the reasonable confines within the organization. But when you have when you know what your culture is, and when you are accepting all types of people, all types of backgrounds, all people with all types of perspectives and points of views, it becomes something that you don't necessarily have to measure because your organization is organically a diverse and inclusive organization. And that is where the belonging and the equity of diversity and inclusion comes in.
But in the first instance, once we set a new pattern, somebody has to be the culture police. So Sonia, who is the culture police to ensure that, when you come to the stop sign, you stop, and when you see that red green light, you go?
Well, you're not a police person, but you're a molder and the leader. And usually leaders like to delegate this to HR, and I say no. When organizations come to me to say, I want to develop a D&I plan, I say, if you're not bringing the CEO, then we can't work together, because ultimately they're the ones responsible. This is not something you just, HR is critical to helping you do it, but it must be driven by the CEO, and they're a molder of it. And so what you do is you have that diversity, you bring those people together, and then you have to build inclusive skills. You have to build inclusive leaders who understand how to pull from people, how to harness their talents and their ideas and allow them to be applied appropriately. And so it's modeling that as a leader, ensuring your leadership team models it. It's also when you have diversity and you want metrics, you want to measure inclusion by asking people, do you have a sense of belonging? Do you feel engaged in this organization? And then believe them when they tell you no. And when they tell you no, then you ask them, well, how would you like to be included? How would you like to have that sense of belonging? And then utilize and act on that information.
You know, some would say, when they hear no, they will say, oh, okay, well, there you go. Because clearly you have no intention of helping me achieve what I want to achieve. So you answered me with no, you go. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about creating that space where everyone feels valued, and in doing so, that they can now give of their best self. But, you know, to achieve all of this, we have to first start with acknowledging that there is diversity and how we can quote it out so that we can have a more inclusive space. But if not to do it, what's the danger, Nicholas, in not doing it or in not getting it right? What's the danger?
So I think I had mentioned it earlier in terms of the organization not being a rich organization. The whole purpose of diversity and inclusion, like I mentioned, is that we operate within a society that has people that have various perspectives and various backgrounds, and we bring a rich thought process with that. With that being said, if it is that we don't have that within the organization, it can affect the bottom line. You can have disengaged employees. You can have a culture that is toxic. All of these things work to undermine the success of the organization and the success of your employees. And obviously, we want a harmony. The organization, as it's on a whole, and its employees working together for the success of the business, because obviously a business is there to make a profit. But with that being said, when people come to an organization, we want them to bring their best selves. And if they don't bring their best selves, it means that the organization is not meeting its purpose of meeting the people need, because we are people. And when we interact, we want to feel as if we enjoy the work that we do, and we want to go to an organization that we're happy in. And if the organization is not diverse and if it's not inclusive, these things will not occur.
Sonia, someone listening who runs a business today, hearing all that Nicholas would have just said and said to themselves, you know, I'm getting it wrong, but I want to start today to get it right. But I don't feel as if I have enough time to be able to turn that tide. Is it a time sensitive, and how timely is it? How much time really is taken to get all this in place?
Well, it doesn't take a lot to start, because the first thing we do is come in and say, well, what are you trying to accomplish? What's the great challenges that you have? And how are your people currently feeling? How engaged are they? And then we identify where the pain points are, and then we tackle those. And it's really easy to start. What is often difficult for people is to continue it. You know, starting a new habit, being inclusive, listening to people. When you're trying to get things done and you're exhausted and you're just trying to move things up, it takes time, it takes emotional energy to just listen so you can address people's issues and explain why you're moving left instead of right as they want you to do that. But it's an investment, and I talk about this all the time, an investment in time and energy that pays off. And gets easier as you go on. So I would say to people, the barriers to starting are not high. So just start, because it's a journey. And once you start it and you strengthen those inclusive muscles, then you will start to see that instead of having to drag people, and I know earlier you said, well, people say no, and then you ask them to go. Not in today's environment. Your organizations are struggling to find people. And so if you want to not be continuously on a merry-go-round of trying to get people, then this is an investment that you should start today.
today, folks. And so today you can start it. You can contact HRMAB, HRMAB.org.bb. That's a good place, a great place to start. I wouldn't even go to the superlative. Great place to start. All of these professionals that we have on with you, and those two in particular that you see on your screen, they're happy to respond to your requests for information and assistance. Of course, membership is absolutely vital. So we encourage you as much as possible as well to join the organization HRMAB, because with membership comes tremendous benefits indeed. A subject that I hope engages the minds and attention of many businesses today, starting today if it hasn't already begun to do so. And I hope that they begin to implement as soon as possible so that we do see that diversity and inclusivity in every workspace where we can all turn up and all feel respected, included, and also, achieving. Thanks to you indeed, Nicholas Roberts, and my good friend Sonia Layne-Gartside as well. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.